It's now 9:05, and I understand that traffic and weather are terrible right now. And so we will be potentially moving some items around on the agenda to accommodate any latecomers as necessary. So if we could please start off with Susan, get a roll call and establish a quorum, please.
Sure. So Darren Van Steenwick.
Here?
Curtis Good.
Here.
Nareshta Gall.
Here.
Rhonda Brandt.
Here.
And Mike Duran.
Here.
So we've established a quorum with 5 of the 7 members.
Excellent, thank you. And then I'd also like to introduce Tim McDonough. He is the Deputy Attorney General assigned to assist the board for us, and so he will be participating as appropriate for this meeting. Yes, yes. So if we could please get a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So as we see, item number 3 is public comment not on the agenda. I'm actually going to move that to to later on in the meeting, potentially towards the end, to allow again any latecomers to participate in that. So moving on to item number 4, approval of the minutes for the October 12th and 13th board meeting.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Do we have any comments on or amendments to the minutes as they stand? Okay, hearing none. We need do we need a roll call vote for this, Fred?
Mr. Vice President, there also should be public comments on regarding the minutes.
Sorry, is there any public comments on the minutes themselves? Okay, hearing none. Do we need a roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay, Susan, please.
Okay, Darren Van Steenwick.
Yes.
Curtis Good.
Yes.
Rhonda Brandt. Nareshta Gall.
Yes.
And Mike Duran.
Yes.
Excellent. So moving on to item number 5, the Executive Officer's Report. Susan, this is for you.
Okay, there's several items in your board packages. If you have questions, I'll answer those for you. Your licensing survey results are in the board packages. WDO statistics are in the board packages. The next several documents are our regulation update. In that package, if you see anything that's highlighted in those packages, in that package, those are items that are currently in the works. It may be a regulation that we have already submitted to DCA Legal for their review, or it may be a regulation that's in the works that we have yet to submit to DCA and then to Office of Administrative Law. So if you have questions on those, I can answer those for you. The next item in your board package is a 6-page document.
Actually, Susan, can I interrupt you on that one? Sure. So actually, I do have a question on, it would be page 17 on 1970.4, the pesticide disclosure requirement, allowing additional updates allowing information about pesticide use to be distributed electronically. So where exactly are we at with that specific regulation?
I believe that is still on Dave's desk to be submitted to DCA Legal, correct?
I have it written, so the reason we held off on that was we had just done an amendment to that section. Became effective July 1st of 16. So I've got the proposal written. DCA just implemented some new procedures for regs. They need to do a pre-review of them now. So it's essentially added 4 months to the process. So I'm going to submit it for pre-review. then it'll go to OAL. Total of like a 16-month process now to get them implemented, so.
Okay, so,
As Dave mentioned, there is a new policy in place. It used to be that we could write the language, we could notice it with Office of Administrative Law, and at the same time, we would give it to DCA. We didn't have to have their pre-approval. Now, there is a requirement that we submit it to DCA legal. DCA has to get agency to approve it before we can even notice it with the Office of Administrative Law. So unfortunately, it is going to slow down our regulation processing time by at least a few months. Just for your information.
so, so if you could walk us through the timeline. So theoretically, you take this, this document that's on your desk and you submit it to, it'd be OAL. What,
Sorry, DCA first.
okay, submit to DCA. What then is the time frame that we would then be able to see this go into play?
So I've got 3 regs with DCA or OAL right now, getting finished. As soon as those are, done at OAL, I'm gonna submit 1970.4. So we're probably looking at January 1st, 2020 effective date, something like that.
2020?
It's 16 months.
Well, maybe January 1, 19.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I might be getting my dates confused, but yeah, 16 months from the time it first goes to DCA to an effective date. I mean, OAL also puts quarterly effective dates on it, so when they approve it, it's the next quarter that it becomes effective, so that adds a little, a couple more months to it.
Okay, so adding this time frame affects all regulations moving forward that we would ask for amendments on.
Yes, for every program in DCA. As I said before, we could submit it to Office of Administrative Law and do the 45 notice day, the notice period, and have that board meeting established and the date established for the public hearing. At the same time, we would submit it to DCA for their review. Now we have to go through the DCA pre-review. They have to get agency to agree to it. Then we have to notice it with Office of Administrative Law and give them the 45-day notice and then have the public hearing. So it certainly is delaying it at least 6 months, maybe longer, Fred. I mean, I don't know what your average time processing is for you to review and for agency to approve it. If you can respond to that.
As far as the delay is concerned, I mean, I'll work as fast as I can on those, but Susan's right, it may impose a delay because of the additional time for the pre-review.
Okay. I'm just, as we move forward and adjust regulations, I'm just trying to get a perspective on how long it will actually take to get regulations in play for industry and when it's enforceable for them or to be able to use or be used against them at some point. And so you're talking potentially it changes that time frame from roughly a year, 12 to 18 months to probably 18 to 24 months more likely.
Yes, that's
Okay.
what I would say. Yeah. From the initial thought of, okay, we need to change this regulation, here's the draft language, I would guess that it's going to be a 2-year process from now on, going forward.
I think these new DCA guidelines are in response to the North Carolina decision.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
To have more oversight and review.
Okay. That's just good to know. That was the only question I had on that.
On the regulations?
Yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned, the last document in your EO report is a 6-page document that's about 10 statutes that the board members have previously approved and told me to go forward with getting an author. This is in here just for informational purposes to remind you that these 10 items, well, 9, 10, however many there are, these statutes have not been changed yet. I am trying to find authors for this legislative session to get these in place. The only other things I have that I was going to mention, we have a couple staffing changes. I mentioned at the last board meeting that we had filled some positions, we had made some promotions. We filled 3 more positions since our last board meeting. So I see that Rachel is in the audience. Rachel, if you want to give him a wave or something. Rachel's now in the licensing unit. She took over Jamie's position of doing processing pesticide use stamps and CE audit and things of that nature. Rachel came on November 1st. Then we hired another staff person in December, Melissa. So now we have a second Melissa. She took over Kibby's position, so she's going to be processing all the applicator paperwork, anything to do with the applicators. And then we have one position that was vacant in the enforcement unit. We did fill that position. That employee came on with us in December as well, and that's Francisco Del Pozo. Francisco, give him a wave. You guys may recognize the name. Francisco worked for us for a few years ago. He was on the examination desk, and now he's, we like to call it, he's returned home. We have a few other people in the audience from staff. Maria, you started about 4 months ago? August, okay. Then we have, of course, Melissa is in the audience, our first Melissa. And Christina, we have Kathy Boyle in the audience with us. And then we also have Ed and Tom, 2 of our specialists in the field. And also we have Roberta Jetta here from Department of Pesticide Regulation. Let's see.
Susan?
Yes?
Kathy, did you have a comment?
Oh, hi, Persa, sorry. Persa is also here from DPR. Let's see. One reminder I wanted to make is CCR section 1960. That was the regulation in regards to if you've never previously been live scanned and you were issued a license prior to July 1st, 2004, then effective 1/1/16, you were required to go get live scan before you could renew. So we made it through the first round of renewals, which was June 30th of 16. We had a couple hundred individuals who elected not to go get live scan, and therefore we could not renew them. But I didn't think that was too bad, considering that we had 5,000 licensees that had to go get live scan. So if there's an individual that has been licensed prior to July 1st, 2004, and they are coming up for renewal June 30th of 17 or June 30th of 18, they are required to go get live scan. We initially notified all licensees last year. We will notify the June 30th, 17 renewal licensees this year of that requirement, and then of course we'll follow up with a second notification and a final notification as well. The only other thing that I had that I wanted to mention was we've started working on the occupational analysis for the operator branch 3 category. We have an occupational analysis workshop scheduled in January. Christina, the last week? Okay, so 24th, 25th. Do you have that one filled already?
That one, we've got about 7 people right now. So
Oh, amazing. Okay, great. Okay. The next workshop for the occupational analysis for the operator branch 3 is in late April. Do you have anybody for that one yet?
not yet, I haven't started recruitment for that one.
Okay. We sent out a flyer indicating that if you want to attend in January or you'd like to attend in April, then please let us know. I'm a little worried about attendance in late April for that category because that's kind of your guys' busy season. So I may have to send out some emails to try and get help with that one. Just FYI. That's all I have unless you have questions for me.
So moving on past that, sorry, is there any public comments on anything that Susan discussed? Okay. So the next agenda item, discussion and possible board action regarding the recommendations for the CIPM Review Committee and the potential conflicts with the proposed federal continuing education training guidelines. So we discussed this last meeting, and we decided to prioritize it this meeting. What we were waiting for was what's called the EPA C&T, or Certification and Training ruling that the EPA has been working on for years. So what happened was originally EPA came out with a certification and training ruling, and there was feedback and pushback from across the country for what EPA was going to ask or require the states to do. But what has happened is after EPA got enough, federal EPA got enough feedback, they went back and revised their C&T, their certification and training ruling, and it came out in, I believe, in December. And so, and we wanted to make sure that how we're going to move forward with potentially revamping our continuing education structure, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't any conflict. And after looking at, after reviewing the ruling that came out in December, it really doesn't look like there's going to be any potential conflict with regards to the recommendations that came from the C committee for us as a board to potentially address revamping our continuing education structure. Board members, do you guys had a chance to look over this? Do you guys see any conflict or any issues with that?
Yes, Mr. President. And looking at these recommendations, and particularly to recommendation number 1, and then when it goes down to down to recommendation number 2, when they have percentages of laws and regulations that they've taken that down to clear down to 15%. I'm a little bit concerned with that. And I know there's a huge emphasis on IPM, but I'd be fine splitting the ANIs and maybe the IPM. But currently, Susan, what percentage of the continuing education, what percentage? It's 8 hours, right, for laws and regs?
Yes.
So that's technically 15%,
It'd be
50%. So I'm very concerned dropping that clear down to a 15%. I think that's extremely low.
So that was definitely one of those points of discussion throughout the entire process. The reason why the committee agreed to drop it that low was because by completely recategorizing and restructuring the continuing education requirements, what the industry is currently using as laws and regs hours, or what would fit that laws and regs currently, would be changed to fit into essentially, I think it'd be the A&I is what we were talking about. And so because we know that a lot of the industry uses the annual safety training as part of to fulfill those requirements, and those requirements would then end up falling under the A&I section, which is one of the reasons why that application intervention is pretty high, and so it would fall under that, because when you look at the way the Act currently states, what falls under laws and regs are any new or updated regulations, and so and the committee felt that there was a lot of the hours that were currently being used, again, for those laws and regs were inappropriately classified
Okay.
as laws and regs.
Okay.
So there was quite a bit of time looking at the letter of the law currently, the way it stands, as to what the classifications are, And so it wasn't to cut out laws and regs specifically, but it was to fit the way that the Act currently states what should be in laws and regs.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
The other thing about this recommendation, when I was originally instructed to write this up and implement it, I ran into some things that it was kind of conflicting with these percentages. I brought it back and asked for more guidance from the board, and I think I was instructed to kind of just go ahead and implement a workaround and then bring it back and see if you guys liked it. So the percentages aren't necessarily what you'll see when the proposal comes back to you. So keep that in mind too. I think the concept was increasing IPM while reducing the laws and regulations, and the board asked me to, if I ran into any conflicts, to just resolve those on my own and bring it back for your approval. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Naresh. Yes, I just want to re-emphasize the point here. The way these percentages are and what we discussed earlier in the committee, I just want to make sure this thing that laws and regulations now are requirements. You're trying to address the requirements, not the activity. Activity is more defined into the application and interventions, where you have, just to give an example, OSHA requirements. So that is act and regulation requirements. What compared to a training that is more focused on worker safety, because both are like almost parallels. Earlier, the worker safety was part of the laws and regulations, but now you're taking it out and adding more percentage towards the application intervention. Is that right?
Yeah. If my memory serves me correctly, if you look at the application intervention under that bullet point, it specifically says worker safety, including respirators, ladders, and fit tests, which industry is currently using that as laws and regs, but we're then going to reclassify it as application intervention, application and intervention. So it's not like the industry would be exempted from covering it. It would just be handled differently within the documentation of that training.
Thank you.
So based on this conversation, it sounds like, from the board's perspective that there isn't any conflict with what the certification and training ruling from EPA has with what our industry wants to move forward with. And so so it sounds like we want to move forward with looking at exactly how these recommendations potentially could and would be integrated into the industry. Board members, do you see any conflict with that?
I mean, I'm good with the classification of some of the classes, because it was kind of confusing before, but I still think that 15% is a little bit low on just percentage-wise looking at that. The percentages we will definitely deal with. Right now I'm just looking at the idea of should we and can we move forward with this, and then we'll get to that point. Okay. Yeah.
You're good with it, Mike?
Might be okay. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think that I could buy this.
Okay. Is there any public comment on the EPA certification and training ruling potentially being in conflict with what the industry wants to do to reclassify or recategorize continuing education for the industry, for licensees? Okay, so
Did this go before PCOC?
PCOC was involved in writing these in writing these recommendations.
Okay.
And so it hasn't necessarily been presented to PCOC, but to put PCOC on the spot, we have a new PCOC has a new executive vice president. Is that your title? Okay, it's something like that. Chris Rudin. So Chris, if you could please approach the approach the mic, and then introduce yourself and potentially comment on that.
No, Mr. Chairman, it is nice to be back here again. I haven't talked to the structural board in a long time. It's good to be here and good to talk to you once again. Mr. Chair, if I might, I'm familiar with this, but we haven't had great discussion with this within PCLC, to be quite honest with you. I can't imagine there would be, I imagine there would be some questions about it, but I think it's going in the right direction, to be candid with you.
Okay, so if I could get a motion from the board to direct staff to continue to move forward on this, and then whatever that looks like. Dave, looks like you have a comment or a question.
I'll start writing some proposed language and bring it back to you guys for approval. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Do we need a motion for that?
Yes, so in essence, is the board going to adopt the recommendations of the committee?
These recommendations have already been adopted. We just the board put them on hold because EPA came out with that certification training ruling, which it's in its first iteration would have been in drastic conflict with what the recommendations state.
Okay.
Now, because EPA came out with those recommendations, because their ruling has changed, they're now not in conflict with these recommendations.
Okay, so in essence, if the decision still stands, then yeah, the following step would be to instruct staff to come up with the appropriate regulatory language to bring back to the board for approval.
Okay, Susan, you had a comment?
Well, only that the board already directed staff to start working on that.
Okay,
So that was the direction about a year and a half ago, then we put it on hold because of the Fed change.
okay. So
You want them to make another motion, or just go back to the one we already have on record?
You know what, just to be safe, let's go ahead and
Make a
put it on
motion?
the record, right? Because at the last meeting, there was discussion about putting everything on hold and stuff like that. So
Okay.
just-
Okay, can I get a motion to do that?
I will make the motion to direct staff.
Okay, can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Rana seconds. Any comment from the board on that?
Again, just
Discussion?
for the record, there is a motion to instruct staff to come back with regulatory language for the board to examine and approve.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay, so is there any discussion from the board on this? Any discussion from the public on this motion?
Just a quick question, clarifying question. So I understand it, this will be prepared to vote at the next meeting?
No. Potentially.
We may have draft language that we can bring back to you at like the April meeting or the July meeting for you to review and approve. And then at that point, it would have to go to legal to review, they would have to send it to agency before we could ever notice it with Office of Administrative Law.
Okay, just wanted to understand it, thank you.
Yeah, and we're also talking, remember, once it's, again, timeframes, once we as a board approve the language for the regulatory change, we're talking roughly 18 to 24 months before anything would actually go into print and would then be implemented by licensees. Okay.
Yeah, and also one of the recommendations here was to set the effective date 3 years out from when it becomes operative, so.
Yeah,
So, it would be quite a while, yeah.
Perfect. No, I
yeah,
just want.
yeah,
thank you.
yes, yeah. So we're talking.
We're talking a while.
Yeah, we're talking a long while, but before it actually goes into effect for the.
It allows us in our membership to vet and review as well, so.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, so if we can get a roll call vote, do we need a roll call vote? Okay, roll call vote, Susan?
Darren Van Steenwyk,
Yes.
Curtis Good,
Yes.
Rhonda Brandt,
Yes.
Naresh Jagal,
Yes.
and Mike Durant.
Yes.
Excellent. So moving on to the next agenda item, discussion and possible board action and position in board action regarding Business and Professionals Code 8698.6 and the possible extension of the Structural Pest Control Enforcement Act. Structural Pest Control Fumigation Enforcement Program, sorry. Curtis, would you like to comment on this initially, please?
Sure. Well, we received, I guess, information that CACASA is interested in possibly making some changes and adding additional counties. I don't know what counties they're referring to, and then also potentially fee increases. I don't know what that consists of. My comments in that area is that I know there's a lot of new individuals serving on the fumigation enforcement program. I think there was procedures in place that committee has written to add additional counties and what they have to go through. In prior experiences, we didn't want to open it up to the entire state because there's a lot of the counties already are funded through DPR, and just to add a county where maybe there's only a few thousand fumigations taking place, the revenues raised wouldn't give that county enough money to add additional personnel. So I have concerns that way, depending on what counties we're discussing. I'd like to remind the counties is that there was a 60% increase the last time that this went through, and the sunset provision that we moved forward with last time, I think, was 3 years ago. So I think time is of the essence. I think it's a very good program. Majority, or at least 50% of the fumigation enforcement programs, I think it's a very valuable program. I don't mean to speak for PCOC in the fumigation industry. I don't see anybody in the audience, but I'm very much in favor. We do have a timeline to which to act. We have to find an author, and I'm not sure who's going to be carrying it. I think PCOC in the past has carried the water on this. I'm not positive, but I would move to support it in light of the way it is, and then hear what recommendations it might be coming forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments from the board on this? Curtis?
I guess I would need to make a motion that we move forward and accept.
Well, I just wanted to
what-
comment that I've been talking with Laura Parr, PCOC's lobbyist. She has reached out to Assemblymember Bacanegra's office, who carried the sunset provision to extend this program 4 years ago into 18 from 2014. So she's reached out to his office. There have been some discussions with staff already. We don't have a firm yes, they'll carry it and author it, but she has started working on that process. Is that about correct?
Please.
Yeah, Chris Reardon again, PCLC. That's correct, Susan. And let me just comment too, because there was a public record here regarding my name in it. There has been what I'd characterize as brief discussions regarding this issue. And frankly, as I talked to CACASA yesterday, this hasn't been fully vetted within PCOC. As I said, these were very brief discussions on this enforcement program. And Curtis, you mentioned additional counties and fees. I don't think anyone has any idea what that fee would look like, because there's been no research on it. As you said, it was just increased 3 years ago. Yeah. I'm not aware of any counties that have come forward and said, oh, by the way, we want to be part of this program yet. So we'd fully want to vet this before. And I'd also say, having some experience with this, I don't think from an industry perspective, we can't stand still here. As you know, the sunset's done January of next year, so we have to proceed forward.
Yeah.
And that's why I explained to the person that reached out to me from CACASA who wanted to delay this to the April board meeting. I reached out to her and said, I suspect that the board members will vote to go forward and ask me to find an author because of time constraints and trying to get a bill in place printed by the end of February. But we will obviously bring it back to the April board meeting and have it on the agenda as well. And she responded back to me late yesterday and said she totally understands the constraints for the legislature and stuff, and she expects the board members to move forward with it and then have it on the agenda probably for April and July.
So with that said, it sounds like Curtis is making a motion to.
Is there any other public
Oh, I'm
comment
sorry.
in this case?
Is there any other public comment before the motion's made?
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we move forward on the sunset provision and accept it as is, the way it stands currently in language. I think I'm safe in speaking for the industry in that way.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so Mike seconds.
So with the draft proposal that basically just leaving the program the same way it is exactly, but extending it to 2022, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So just to be clear, so in essence, the motion is to instruct the Susan to go ahead and find a legislative author for the amendments, not amendments, but for the sunsets statute just listed in this packet, correct?
Correct.
Continue it.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion from the board?
Okay, roll call.
Oh, do we, any
I'm sorry.
any discussion or comments from the public on this? Okay, Susan?
Roll call. Darren Van Steenwyk.
Yes.
Curtis Good.
Yes.
Rhonda Brandt.
Yes.
Naresh Jagal.
Yes.
And Mike Duran.
Yes.
Excellent. So we're moving forward with that. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 8. The Structural Pest Control Board Research Advisory Panel update and possible board discussion and action regarding the proposed topics for research for the request for proposal for the Board Research Fund contract. Susan, is that, do you want to address that now, or would you like to wait?
Well, I thought that Nita was going to be here. She had indicated on Tuesday that she would be here, but I don't see her in the audience. If you'd like to delay it for a short time, we can, or if you'd like, I can give the board members a summary of what the research panel did in October.
Why don't you do that, and then if and when Nita arrives, we can integrate her comments a little later on in the meeting.
Okay. So there was a teleconference meeting on July 25th, 2016 of the Research Panel Advisory Committee. Members that were on that teleconference was the chair, Nita Davison, Pat Copps from the industry, Naresh Jagal, board member, Mike Katz from the industry, and then Carrie Winbill Rojas from the UC system. That's the 5-panel member, and all 5 were present in that teleconference. They reviewed the last proposal, the last research proposal that was submitted several years back. They made some recommendations as to the areas that they wanted to see identified in a current RFP. If you like, I'll go ahead and go over the items that they voted on. Number 1, they wanted to establish that there's no minimum dollar amount for a researcher to submit a proposal. On the last page, number 4 at the top, they wanted to set the maximum criteria amount at $330,000 per proposal. The next item is the proposal should focus on the study of and integrated pest management for the following structural pests: ants, bedbugs, cockroaches, drywood termites, rodents, and yellow jackets. The other motion that they made was they made a motion to change the scoring criteria slightly from the last proposal that was issued several years ago. They changed the scoring criteria to research objective would be weighted at 25%, the projection direction weighted at 35%, qualifications weighted at 20%, and the budget and budget narrative at 20%. So those are the 4 items that the research panel discussed and voted on and made motions. If the board members are in agreement, then I would look for a motion that you're in agreement with those changes and to direct me and staff to start working on preparing a research for proposal with the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Thank you. Is there any board comment on that? But yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add to what Susan did a good job describing it? Excellent.
I do have a comment that I know there's some work that's been done by Dr. Quinn determining how rodenticides are ingested by predators, and I didn't see that I know she's doing some current research, and I was hoping to see that as part of one of the RFPs.
So
But it didn't.
it didn't actually make it in the recommendation.
Well, it was definitely discussed though, and I think, Susan, if you can confirm this, they determined that the criteria they came up with would encompass that. They would entertain proposals. I think their rationale was that IPM included that very thing.
Let me comment on that. Yes, the final outcome of this one was the IPM method, and that you can see the rodents are included there. So the subject of any kind within that parameters is acceptable within it.
Okay, very good. So she's not excluded. Okay, great. Thank you.
So do we have, or is there any public comment on the meeting minutes? Excellent. Do we have a motion to accept the recommendations as Susan described them?
Susan, can you remind how much is in that fund right now?
Probably about 1.2 mil.
Pretty soon.
Because it was about $1 million last time I checked, and that was a few months ago. But I think that was effective 6/30 2016. So we might be about 1.1. We were going on the notion that there was probably about $1 million available.
Very good, thank you.
So we thought that even at this maximum, that there would be an opportunity for several research projects to get funded.
Excellent, thank you.
So is that why they capped out each individual research project at that specific number?
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
So they can take a full advantage of how much money is available and look at multiple areas, was the hope of the panel.
Excellent. So do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Curtis makes the motion. Do we have a second?
So moved.
Okay, Mike second.
Again, just for, sorry to be the bad guy here today, but just for clarification and for the record, so is the motion to adopt the recommendations of the committee and also and then thereby instruct staff to write and come up with the request for proposals?
Yes.
I want to make sure I'm thinking the same thing you are. Okay. Sorry, Curtis, I had to talk over you. Okay, so is there any board discussion on the motion? Okay, any public comment on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Susan, roll call vote, please.
Darren Van Steenwyk?
Yes.
Curtis Good?
Yes.
Rhonda Brand?
Yes.
Naresh Tegal?
Yes.
And Mike Duran.
Yes.
So then, myself and staff will begin the process of working with Department of Consumer Affairs contracts units to prepare an RFP and go forward with that process.
Excellent. So moving on to the next agenda item. Discussion and possible board action on Assembly Bill 551 and its amendment to the Civil Code to add sections 1954.6 and 1954.6001 regarding incorporating training on bedbug management for licensure requirements. Susan, we were expecting somebody to show up and talk about that, correct?
Yes,
Is
I
that-
received a letter 2 days ago from the California Apartment Association and Western Center on Law and Poverty. I emailed a copy of that to every board member. If you don't have that with you, Dave brought extra copies. I believe that we do have Deborah and come forward, Deborah. Introduce yourself.
Excellent. So thank you. So please introduce yourself and your affiliation.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Mr. President and members of the board. My name is Deborah Carlton. I represent the California Apartment Association. We have approximately 50,000 members throughout California, all the way from the Oregon border to San Diego. We represent not only the largest real estate investment trusts in California, but also your single-family mom and pops. We, of course, have been working on this issue for what seems like over a decade. The explosion of bed bugs in our industry has really taken on a big challenge for our members. We, of course, have been working for 2 years on the legislation, AB 551. We came to some resolution last year and were successful in passing that. We included in the legislation recommendations for this board to work on education requirements. We did not put a mandate within the legislation, knowing that you are the experts. You know what would be best for the industry. I will tell you that we believe it's so important to have a united front with the landlords and the tenants, and with all of you as well, being the experts and hopefully helping us eradicate this big challenge for our industry as well as for the tenants. So we come here today. We had sent a letter just encouraging you to adopt maybe something similar to the national standards that we work with our members to educate them. We've been putting forward webinars. We have disclosure forms. We work with our members on education. So we believe that one of the last puzzle pieces is to make sure that we have some standards here, and I believe you probably already have some as well, but to make sure that we have the most current standards for the industry. Thank you.
So one of the questions that I have when looking at the legislation and then your letter is, so the legislation does not require PCOs to be used. And so because it does not require PCOs to be used, we know that there is quite a bit of still self-treating. And so because there's still quite a bit of self-treating, if any of your constituents don't even engage our industry, how is educating our industry going to help that situation?
Well, you're absolutely right. Education on our part is certainly growing when it comes to making sure that our industry understands self-treatment just doesn't work. I think that is an important factor. We would have liked to have mandated some of that within the legislation. In fact, I think we're going to come back and do some of that going forward. I think one of the challenges that we certainly have is to make sure that when our folks do engage a PCO, that they come to them with the appropriate education and appropriate requirements. Even though the mandate is not there in the statute, I will tell you that litigation is really on the rise, and I think that is also, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is one way in which some of the requirements for PCOs is being enforced. Of course, we don't like litigation, and so it's incumbent upon us to continue to educate our industry. I would say that those individuals that are members of our organizations truly do understand the importance of hiring a PCO. And again, I think we go back at the legislature this year to see if we can get some mandates.
So why were they removed? Because my impression was they were in there initially. Why were they removed? And then what makes you confident that you'll be able to get them back in?
You know, it was a huge group of individuals that came to the table. I don't know if it's because we had some local ordinances already in place. We wanted to ensure that we had a consistent standard throughout the state. Some cities like San Francisco already have local ordinances, and we're looking to make sure that the enforcement and the tenants' cooperation is also mandated. We just didn't come to a consistent understanding of everybody's part when it came to how we would write that. So we gave ourselves another year to see what we can do to write the bigger picture, not just the mandate for the PCOs.
And what has been the response from your industry or your constituents on essentially, if I can interpret this correctly, is essentially the landlords and the property managers to become financially responsible for the bed bug control services.
That's a very good point. Our recommendation to our members is that our members become financially responsible. What we have seen when some rental property owners try to put the mandate on tenants become fearful of reporting that they believe they may have bed bugs in their unit. When they don't report, as you know, the infestation travels and explodes just quite quickly throughout a property. So it's our recommendation that the rental property owners be the responsible entities for paying for the PCO and the hiring and the research and work that needs to be done.
Oh, my impression was that was mandated in 551.
No, there was no mandate in 551 for who pays. We were silent on that.
Okay, so when it says retaliation against the tenants, what would that entail then?
Retaliation would mean that we can't evict them. We can't raise their rent as a result of that. But what happens, for example, in a single-family home? It's probably, and the tenant's been there for a while, it's probably likely that the tenant is the one who brought in the bed bugs as opposed to a worker that may come in and out of the units like we see in multifamily. So we were, again, silent on that issue because we knew that it was so diverse in the industry, from your single-family homes to your multifamily. So we wanted to work to find a way to clarify the responsibility. But retaliation for us means you can't evict, you can't raise the rent, and you can't threaten the tenant with some other kind of action.
Does the board have comments, questions on this discussion?
Yes, Ms. Carlton. What's your overall feeling from the industry? I mean, has our industry or our licensees of this board have been uncooperative, or what's your feeling? Why do you think that they need so much additional training?
It's very diverse in the stories, and I will tell you, they're just simply the stories that we've had from our industry. And this is Jith from the Western Center on Law and Poverty, so he could also comment on what we have seen in the industry. It seems to be very diverse. We do work very closely with individuals who have the most current education. But I will tell you, we do see some that don't have the most current education, and our members are spending thousands of dollars. And again, I realize that this is, you're trying to control it. Sometimes, in some cases, it's so extensive, there's no guarantees on when or how you're going to get rid of this. But again, for the most current education, and I think that that's simply what we're asking for, is that we elevate the education in the industry, because we're not seeing it consistent throughout the industry, the PCOs.
So, have you? What kind of actions have you taken to educate your constituents who are doing self-treating on how to control bed bugs?
Well, certainly our recommendation in both written policy and the education that we're holding is no self-treatment. You do not do self-treatment. You're going to end up with a much bigger problem. We've been doing that for almost the last decade, if you will, when we first had hoped that the industry, meaning landlords, tenants, and PCOs, could find a way to resolve this, or more technology would come forward and help us eradicate. But again, our policy is no self-treatment. You must be aware of the Pest Control Operators of California? Yes, we've worked with them, yes.
You have?
We do.
Do you advise your clientele to reach out to a trade organization member?
We absolutely do. A trade organization member is very important for us. We worked with them on the legislation, and they also had recommended that we not do a mandate within the statute, but that we come to you and ask you for education requirements.
Okay. Yeah, I just have a bit of a problem niching out a particular insect for us to regulate on when there is general guidelines already for education and continuing education programs. I mean, I understand your plight. I'm an industry member, so I totally get it. But just carving out a specific area of regulation, I have a little bit of a problem with. But I guess we can see what we do. Welcome. Did you have anything to add?
No, I just,
I'm sorry, if you could introduce yourself and your association, please.
sure. Jith Meganathan, Western Center on Law and Poverty. We represent low-income tenants throughout California and work closely with the Apartment Association as part of a working group to draft AB 551 and worked on the passage of the law. What I would add is that tenants are often the least sophisticated actor among these three parties, between the tenants, the landlords, and the PCOs, and are in many ways dependent on the guidance that's provided to them by the PCO or by the landlord who's being advised by the PCO. The problem that we see is that because bed bugs are often very difficult to eradicate, that tenants can be blamed for infestations and forced to move out. And it may simply be because a proper treatment plan or bed bug management plan wasn't followed. And to echo what Ms. Carlton said, what we would like to see are a consistent set of training standards so that when a PCO is called in, that tenants can be assured that whatever plan is given to them meets industry standards. Because landlords face, of course, significant economic loss. Given the housing crisis in California today, tenants, particularly low-income tenants who may be unfairly evicted, are at significant risk of homelessness and all of the attendant harms with that. So I understand that carving out an insect among the myriad of insects that your industry is attempting to control is unusual. But because it is so difficult to treat this particular insect, we hear tragic stories from across the state of tenants being blamed where if a proper management plan were put in place, we could avoid these harms. Thank you.
I totally agree. I mean, there's not a time I check into the nicest hotels and I'm doing my own inspection. So I totally understand. It could be, it has, irregardless if it's from a very affordable hotel to a very expensive hotel, it's a insect that is very difficult to control, and a lot of times it's not reported properly and in time. Would you be, I know there's people in the audience here, trade organizations and other providers, what if there was a special certification class that maybe industry was offering to licensees and they got a special certifications that you can promote? Would that be something you might entertain as opposed to, this board taking up, carving out a special niche? I mean, my personal feeling, I like to think a lot of the industry's learned a lot. Those that are involved, particularly PCOC members, they communicate, and this is written up extensively, and it's communicated a lot through the industry and, all the litigation matters that are going on with this insect. So I agree there needs to be a certain individual that is treating this. Even within my own company, I don't let every branch 2 go in and treat. It's certain individuals. I try to have all my branch 2s go through the class, but there's only a handful that I say is to the standard that we want to go in and make the identifications and make sure they're doing follow-up programs. Would that be something that maybe, and I don't mean to speak for PCOC, that if they put a special certification, would that assist you in carving out niche companies or people that you can recommend that your members could look for those individual companies?
Well, certainly any kind of education and standard that we can point to would always be helpful. I know we'd hoped your authority would kind of give the rubber stamp on whatever it is that's out there, because I think that's very helpful for the industry. And again, you're the experts, but any kind of additional education, certification, whether it's you or whether it's an association, would certainly be helpful.
So, because, sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask maybe one other question? And maybe assist me. And Ms. Carlton, how long have you been with CAA?
25 years. I'm aging myself, but yes.
Oh, excellent. I didn't mean for you to do that because you look very lovely, but I just wanted a perspective because this issue started to come to head maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yes.
I mean, even the industry was surprised by it. We didn't even know how to identify it.
Yes.
Has there been improvements through the industry that you've seen in maybe the last 5 years? Has it gotten better?
Yeah, I think it has gotten better in the last 5 years, and you're right. It really hit us really hard about 10 to 15 years ago. Everybody was shocked, and a lot of those programs that landlords who didn't understand were using. Just obviously, we had a lot of work to do very quickly to educate. And I think we'd even talked about legislation a decade ago, and again, everybody was really hoping we'd find some solutions in the private industry. It just didn't happen. So that's why we came forward as a coalition to try to find answers, not only from the education standpoint, but as Jith points out, making sure that tenants aren't unjustly blamed and making sure that landlords take responsibility, because I think they're learning their lessons too. You can't ignore it, and you can't do some of these self-programs that some landlords who are uneducated are doing. So I think we're doing our part on the education, and I think that's helping a lot. And so, again, I think we were hoping the final piece was some added level of either education or places we could point to say, don't hire somebody who hasn't had a certain level of education or doesn't have certification. Because as you point out, you don't send everybody out there.
Yeah.
And you're obviously very educated, and you're paying attention, and it's not just hitting our low-income constituents, it's hitting all levels.
Yeah. Well, I certainly applaud your efforts. It is very needed. And I mean, it's all about communication from everyone involved with the insect. And so I certainly applaud your efforts and where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm definitely sympathetic to your plight and how you want to do what is good and do what's best based upon the individuals that you represent. I am at this point definitely in agreement with Curtis that the idea of carving out specific requirements for a specific pest isn't something that I'm terribly comfortable with at this point. Part of the reason why there's multiple reasons why, but also what you're talking about is educating the industry on the NPMA BMPs, the National Pest Management Association best management practices for bed bug control. Most companies that I know of, and this may or may not be true, but most companies that I know of that are doing quite a bit of bed bug work either know already know those BMPs back and forth or helped write them. Yeah. And so so part of what so part of my general concern with essentially mandating and forcing the entire industry to learn these BMPs, I don't know if that'll get you to where you want to get to, especially because I know that companies are actually exiting bed bug control strategies, and so or providing those services because of litigation, because of the headaches, because of everything associated with it. Because I've talked to PMPs that are actually getting out of bed bug control because they're constantly outbid, they're constantly undercut when they're in their service providings, and they don't get work, and so they just figure it's not worth me even sending somebody out to even look at it because I'm not going to get it, because there's certain companies that just that sell that service on bottom dollar. Now, I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say that those companies know about the bed bug, know about BMPs, know about the National Pest Management Association best management practices. They may or may not understand them or have them memorized, but they at least know that they're there. And so like I said, I don't necessarily know if mandating or forcing that education on those companies, again, is going to get you where you need to get to. When it comes down to it, it's who does the work, and that decision ultimately lies within the landlords or potentially the tenants' power. If there's somebody that they don't want to use because they're not comfortable with them, they don't have to use them. If they're going to use them because of X, Y, and Z, well, then they're going to use them because of X. They're going to use them because of those reasons, regardless of what education, level of education that PMP has to be able to affect their services or impact their services. I think that. When it comes to education, I think that I'm actually tending to agree with you on the education of landlords is probably more important than anybody else, because we find significant amount of our time as I'm a service provider, and who we talk to and who we end up educating is are the landlords, and so it would help everybody's time frame and help everybody it'd help the process as a whole if they had a good understanding when we walked into it as to what we're going to be potentially providing or even what we're even talking about. I also think that the industry has gotten better over the past 5 years, as you talked about, because there's been significant investment in the industry in tools and technology and service offerings, such as heat is a good example. The availability of heat control or of items or products that we can use heat to control bed bugs has exploded over the past few years. 10 years ago, those basically didn't exist. And the ones that did exist weren't for bed bugs, they were for termites. And so trying to figure out, so they were just trying to modify that. And so yeah, there has been in my mind, there has been significant improvement over the past few years. But again, I'm not terribly, I don't really foresee that mandating education to PMPs on the NPMA best management practices will get you where you need to get to help protect everybody. Naresh?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry I was not able to first grasp the subject here, but now with your dialogue here, I'm able to understand better what you're looking for. Yes, I agree with my fellow members here that it is very hard to just have one specific course for a unique situation you have. The other alternative, but at the end, bottom line is that we are looking for consumer protection. We are trying to basically alleviate this issue, which is becoming much larger than what we anticipated earlier. I think there are other ways to look at this problem is if your industry can basically create a mandate on a PMP, which they are just testified that they follow the national bedbug management protocols. If your industry can mandate that any PMPs used by your group of association member follow those guidelines and have a sign-off. So there is other way to basically enforce the same thing which you are asking us to create an education and outreach to PMPs here. I differ because they are industry members. They're coming from and I'm coming from the consumer side of it. And I see every day the type of pest controls, especially for the bed bugs, are being promoted. Then I have to intervene being a professional in the past, same kind of experience I had, but now coming from a different side of the coin, I try to basically look into exactly what are they promoting. Continuous use of synthetic pyrethroids, a run by bedbug controls. A comprehensive marketing approach, regardless of what standards NPMA has developed. I'm sorry to say this thing that when it reaches to the ground, is not implemented. And that is one of the reasons you are here today asking for that outreach. So how do I basically make a choice as a board member here on your request? Is that I can only propose you an alternative because it is very hard to mandate one single training for a pest because there are hundreds out there. So other way is that to basically enforce on the PMPs. Here is the National Pest Management, which is written very crafty language out there, and it's a good training also. But is it really followed? No. If not, then you basically get a sign off from them. That will basically enforce that person to go back. You can have 2 hours of training. You can have 1 hour of training, depending on how much volume of the training is needed. And then ask your association members or landlords to get the sign off from the PMP they engage. But I do differ. I don't know if there's other avenue at the Structural Pest Control Board to address this issue or the request you have. Thank you.
Ms. Carlton, congratulations on your legislation, but what do you have in place? What benchmarks do you have to know the success of this legislation? How can you monitor this?
Well, currently, because we only have one of the pieces, which is with regard to disclosure, the disclosure is mandatory. And the reports that a PCO provides to an owner who hires a PCO is mandatory to be distributed. I think the only benchmarks, unfortunately, that we have is litigation because there was no additional factors that we agreed to last year. But the disclosure is huge. I think that's a big mandate. We have been voluntarily doing it for the last decade. Now requiring everybody to do it. And of course, helping landlords and tenants understand that this has nothing to do with a substandard condition in most cases. You know, people kind of get a little uneasy when you're talking about bed bugs, but it's happening in the most elite areas, as you say, hotels as well. So the disclosure, I think, is going to help a lot, and we'll watch that, and Jith and I will be working on legislation in the coming years to see what other requirements, even if it's, you know, I don't know if we'll come to an agreement on providing some sort of liability protection if owners do the right thing. Of course, defining the right thing is going to be where the rubber hits the road, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we got as far as we wanted to, and we're encouraged to come here when it came to the education component. But you've provided, I think, some very helpful comments that we'll continue to pursue both legislatively and within the industry itself.
Well, I'd be really curious as to some benchmarks and how you can really understand the success of this legislation. Another question for you, how broad-reaching is this 551? Because there's an area that I see, and maybe you know her, Gail Getty. Have you heard of?
We work with her on a daily basis. She provides education with our industry. We talked with her before coming here. She gave us some very important tips about what you would say when it comes to bringing out a separate a pest. And she said, it's difficult to identify a very individual pest. But I think we wanted to begin this conversation because we want to have a partnership with you, and we want to continue to gain insight from you as to how we stop this explosion. And while it's, I think, we're doing some good positive work, we still have a lot to do.
Right. Well, one other portion of this, and I don't know if maybe I might get in trouble because it might be slightly off topic, but did you look at moving companies, and particularly when you purchase a bed?
Oh, yes.
You know, they go to a house, and that house may have bed bugs in that bed, and they throw it right in the same truck that's lying right next to the brand new bed that they're delivering at the next house.
You're right.
What is being done in that area?
That's horrible. We vendors that are part of our organization, especially those that have the furniture that is used, they now have trucks that either have heating elements, or they also have their places of storage. All of the review is being done because we've met with those industries as well.
Excellent.
I think the other problem is people who go to the street to pick up furniture off of the street. It's just, we're educating. The disclosure, I think, is educating tenants about don't do that. And so it's most unfortunate, but it's coming from all places, all industries, and we're having to work very diligently with the moving companies and with the rental companies as well.
Excellent. Well, let me just commit to you. If you can find some benchmarks, and if you were not hitting some benchmarks and you're able to come in and prove, at least to me as a board member, that it just isn't happening and we need to do more, it's totally not off the table for me.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to review that later.
Okay, thanks.
Could I ask one, or make one comment or ask a question in follow-up? One of the duties that the statute creates upon tenants is if you prefer the term pest management professional? Is
Sure,
that,
that's
that a PMP with a branch 2 license, if the landlord brings in a PMP with a branch 2 license, then the tenant must cooperate with the inspection. So the general privacy rights that tenants have are waived for the purposes of the inspection. One of the reasons we were hoping for sort of a baseline education requirement is that so that tenants could be sure that the PMP, the branch 2 licensee who is coming in to do the inspection, would be properly educated on bedbug management practices, so that I think responsible, ethical PMPs, such as the ones you were describing, who may be getting outbid by folks who may not be following best practices, may not be as qualified. I'm speculating. I don't know why they're able to outbid, but to at least be sure that they have a certain baseline level of education. Now, if you wanted to go with a special certification program in bedbug management, I mean, it may be possible that we get the statute amended so that it's the operators that have that certification for whom tenants have to kind of give up their privacy rights. But what we're trying to avoid is the landlord calling in somebody with a branch 2 license, the tenant giving up their privacy rights, but the person who's coming in not knowing what they're doing. And I'll leave it at that.
No, I totally agree with you. I totally get where you're going. You need an elevated service, an individual that you know that is going to practice those. I would suggest you speak to the gentleman behind you there, Mr. Chris Reardon. He's in charge of the state of California pest control operators, and carve out a niche program where they provide training and certification in this area, and where they can hand a certificate, and then your organizations say, we recommend that you get this particular certification of training, and recommend that you use those individuals that have been through that. I think that's a much faster, simpler way of doing it, and you can put in all you want. I'm sure they would listen to you all day and help you carve out really advanced type training, as opposed to us just making some general type of law that you have to have X amount of hours and everybody moves on. I think they'd be happy to assist you with carving something out like that.
Thank
and
you.
I think you'd meet your expectations.
Yeah, in addition to what I suggest is that I try not to basically say that PCOC is not doing a good job. Basically, it's a branch of NPMA also. And training that has been carved out at the national level, PCOC is doing the same thing at the local level, the regional level, I call it. But to have a training, a good opportunity, so that it is not, even though it is good to have business having their own training, associations having their own training, if a training has to be carved out, it should be from the educational institution. It should be either at the university level or the college level, or of a different kind of where a third party is providing a training, not the business itself. It is good for them to have their own self-training, and I'm not trying to say that they shouldn't have it, but that type of training for bedbug control should be done at the third party level by the educational institution. And UC is one of the good resources we have that should be approached. If that kind of a training that needs to be mandated on a PCOC or a pest control technician. Because what I have found all across the country, especially with this bedbug problem, and I'm personally experiencing it in 180 buildings I have, hospitals, correctional facilities, when we approach a professional company of a cadre that has been qualified through many of vetting process in our counties, I still find when the actual person reaches out there, that branch 2 operator who has to do the job, their mindset is simply a business mindset. And what I'm looking is, as a consumer, an advisory mindset, that this is not good for you. Mm-hmm. I can provide you a better service
you need to pay me for that one. This is what it is, that is the right thing to do. But that thing is being missing in this bedbug explosion in the last 10 years. This is my personal experience, likewise my fellow industry members, they have their own experiences. So I think the education that is needed is from the third-party audit system. And educational institutions like UC are the right way to go.
I'd just like to caution board members. I understand the reason why you guys are trying to help CAA and the Western Center Poverty Law on this issue, but I would like to caution board members that not to necessarily refer them to a specific company or institution for any type of technical.
Got it.
Was there a comment from the audience? Please approach and introduce yourself. And you're no, you guys can say we just have a comment from the audience. Please come forward and introduce yourself. And we're being webcast, and so we'd like to make sure everybody gets their time to shine. So a name and association, please.
Yes, name is Bill Gillespie, Research Endeavors Company. I'm primarily a provider of continuing education, and in this particular specialty. And the best solution that might be the best thing is what what Curtis mentioned, and I'm just wondering how that situation with Africanized bee worked out, which is sort of carving out not regulation, but something worked, for example, with PCOC, where there's a special category that is recognized by the structural board, and it would not have to be exclusively PCOC, but they would be the logical leader in this. So that that particular little category, I don't think you'd call it a category of continuing education, but whatever that was with the Africanized bee, that worked out pretty well, I think, did it not? Perhaps Curtis would know.
Yeah, there was a special certification that they got and obtained a certification.
Did that not work pretty well?
To my knowledge, it has, yes.
That was my comment.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the audience, please?
Chris Fearden again, PCOC. Interesting discussion. I would commit to this board and sponsors legislation to work, sit down and work with you regarding a language. I came in late last year after 551, and one of the things that puzzled me at the time was why wasn't there a mandate in there? And I had some discussions, and I understand there was probably differences of opinion, but we sure want to get this out of individuals' hands if we can, because of the training component of it. And I'm not saying that necessarily direction that everyone in this room wants to go, but I'd sure like to sit down with you and discuss how, if there is a potential for that, and or I'd sure like to investigate more how your feeling is about the certification program, because I think based on our history, that's something that works and something we could probably put together pretty quickly too.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other comments from the audience? Thank you, Chris. Any other comments from the board? Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to agree with much of the discussion that the board has actually brought forth today, my regular board members and my colleagues. I'm an industry member, and I'm licensed in the branch 2 and branch 3. And I see that, that to actually single out a particular type of insect would probably be completely in vain. I do see the need that we need to all work together to try to eradicate this bed bug infestation that we're having. I go to many homes. I service Southern California and Imperial County, and there's a lot of people up there that are in desperate need, of financial. I don't know anybody being thrown out of their houses, but I know a lot of individuals are trying to do the pest control services themselves. after we make an inspection and give them a price, they'll go to their local stores and buy the product, and 4 or 5 months later they'll call me back. But I would like to see something done, to eradicate the bedbug infestation that we do have in our country today. But at the present, I'll have to agree with some of the comments that my fellow board members have actually stated.
Rona, what do you think?
I think everybody's right.
Excellent. Do you guys have any more comments? Okay. So, excellent. So let's take a 10-minute break. So it's currently 10:30. We will re-adjourn at 10:40. It's 10:40, and we're going to call this meeting back to order. Okay, so we are on item number 9. Discussion, we just finished item number 9. Item number 10, discussion and possible board action regarding increasing rodent education and potential possible implementation of a rodent stewardship program. So I'm the one that actually asked to put this on the board agenda last meeting. And so here's a bit of where the background as to why I asked for that. We know that as an industry, there is a lot of attention on the non-target impacts of rodenticides on wildlife. And that there is studies being done to determine pathways, which is one reason why the RFP, one reason why Curtis specifically mentioned that topic in the RFP for the research proposal. That there was legislation last year proposed, but was ended up being pulled. AB 2596 that was going to ban the use of rodenticides in the state of California. And so I just wanted the opportunity to open up the floor to have a conversation about this topic, and should this board take up this topic, or would it be best to defer it? So, and what I mean specifically this topic is in, some sort of rodenticide stewardship program, or is it best to defer it to either industry or another regulatory body or trade associations or whatnot? So, anybody from the board, does anybody have any opinion on that?
Dan, I believe rodenticides in the structural pest control industry is not the problem. And I think in one of the earlier meeting, I did mention this part. Most of this is coming from the agricultural use of rodenticides. Non-target kill and larger exposure is from that particular industry. So how to protect the interests of the industry is more important. So if we have to have a dialogue here, I think that's the dialogue we should have, that how can we carve out that unique and a specific need which structural pest control operators are involved. How can they protect the interests of that particular tool in their IPM toolbox? That's the kind of discussion should be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mike or Curtis, do you have comments?
I think there's some work, that we need to just kind of wait and gather the facts and some of the additional work and studies that are being done before I could probably say what direction is necessary.
Okay. You're specifically looking at what Dr. Quinn's doing with
Yes.
some of her work?
Exactly.
Okay. Mike, do you have any comments on that?
I feel the same way. I think I need to wait a little bit and get more information before I can make an intelligent decision.
Okay. Rana, do you have any additional thoughts?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Any comments from the public on this specific topic? The silence is deafening.
Crickets. Oh.
Comment from the back, please. This meeting's being webcast, so I ask that you come to the front and introduce yourself, your name and your affiliation, please.
Just Mr. Vice President, just information. The public is not required to identify themselves during meetings, although it is completely optional. Just throw it out there.
You're not required, but we ask that you do.
Sure. My name is Kurt Bibb, former PCO, State of California, back in California, looking to get my license back. Question, are we talking the outright ban of rodenticides by use of residential customers themselves or in the industry itself?
The only thing that I was taught, the only thing that this board is able to address are its licensees. And so that would be the professional pest management industry.
Because personally, I mean, pardon the expression, on the consumer end, they probably really shouldn't be using rodenticides. They really shouldn't, because I've seen them gone on the homes before. They broadcasted anywheres, everywheres, accessed by any animal. We all know this. This is just a fact. So just curious what the discussion was going to, transmit into as far as a ban or just much more restricted.
We weren't even talking about because this board is actually not allowed to address any specific uses of products because that actually falls into DPR.
Sure.
I was thinking more on, again, an outreach stewardship program, something having to do with licensees, and it sounds like that this board would rather just sit back and wait and watch to see what happens a little bit, and then potentially have further discussion in the future if that discussion is warranted. Is that what I'm getting? General consensus? Okay, very good. Excellent. So, just item number 11. Susan, I think that's for you.
Okay, so, in your board packages, there are 4 statute recommendations, and these recommendations are coming from staff. Legal has asked me just now to take 8560 off the table. So we'll take 8560 off the table and bring it back at a later date. So I'll go through these. The first one is 8517. We're recommending that the term or non-decay fungi be removed from 8517. I believe that this was a term that was used when we still had wood roof cleaning and treatment and no longer applicable. If the board members agree, I'm assuming that we need to vote on these, make a motion and vote on these one by one?
Yes.
And recommend, that motion would include that you agree with staff's recommendation to make this change and that you're authorizing me to find an author possibly to get into legislation this year.
Susan, can I ask on that 8517, did that also go before the ACT Review Committee? Did they put an eye on this as well?
I'm not real sure, Curtis. I don't recall, actually. Robert, do you recall? Was this the discussion that we had during the...
No, I don't recall at all. I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we need a motion to accept this change.
Staff's recommendation and to authorize me to move forward with finding an author.
I will make that motion.
And that's for each item, so.
Yes.
And the motion is for.
Or 8517.
Just for the records, okay.
Yes. Okay, so we have a motion. A second? Second. Rana seconds. Any further discussion?
Yes. A lot of times industry does work with fungus spores on the surface of the wood, and necessarily you may not see decay. Would this be removing that from an inspector's preview to make note of evidence of fungi on that wood? Are we creating a bigger problem than we're solving?
Robert, you care to address that?
I think that the real concern is whether or not there are a requirement to identify specific wood-destroying organism. And if this non-decay fungi falls within those parameters, I don't think there's going to be a limitation whatsoever on what a particular branch tree inspector can call out and make specific notes for those reportable conditions. This really is an issue that, from what we understand, was born through the original branch 4 classification. And really at this point, the other concern is mold and the board's current position with taking appropriate or remedial action on mold, and whether this opens up or carves a particular issue that might affect a branch 3's occupation insofar as reporting mold, which right now, of course, the board does not take a position on mold, other than that it is not a wood-destroying organism.
Correct.
And not reportable in a inspection report.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Do you have any further questions? Bruce?
No, I just, maybe I don't have enough information.
Okay. Any comments from the public on this? Okay, so hearing none, I think we're ready for a vote.
Okay, so Darren Hanson,
Yes.
Curtis Good,
I'm going to abstain.
Ron Brand, Dinesh Patel,
Yes.
Mike Duran,
Yes.
the motion passes. The next recommendation is 8567, for some background information. Licensees are required to, well, according to law, licensees are supposed to notify the board once they disassociate from a company. Historically, when you're talking about your entry-level individuals like applicators and possibly field reps, they're not real conscious about keeping their records current with the board. So what we'll see on a regular basis is that applicators and field reps will leave a company and then move to another company, but they will never update the records with the board and disassociate from that company. The industry for some time has argued and pushed that they should have the ability to disassociate that individual, because typically the company, Pest company, is keeping much better records administratively than the individuals, and they would like to have the option to disassociate those individuals if the licensee doesn't do that. So this puts in place an option so that if the individual does not disassociate with us, we still have a statute in place that we can take action against that individual. But if the individual doesn't disassociate and the company determines that they are still associated, then the company can submit documentation to the board and we will disassociate that individual from that particular company. We will not change their address of record because their address of record only can be changed by the individual. So the company may continue to get mail for the individual that's no longer there, but they will not be associated to that company on the board's website.
So if the individual leaves the industry.
Well, these particular.
No, okay, so if the individual leaves the industry and their license does not renew, they are removed from the website, correct?
That rolls over into a situation where they're canceled and then they're completely removed, yes.
But if they go and they start a new occupation somewhere else and they just don't renew their license, are they removed from the website?
Yes, because they're going to roll to cancel. If
Okay.
they're not renewed.
Okay.
If they jump from ABC to XYZ to LMK employment and never change their records, then it's going to stay with whoever they did tell us the last
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Dave, you have?
I just want, this was an Act Review Committee recommendation, originally regulatory, but the statute language doesn't allow the regulatory change, so that's why we're recommending this.
So the Act Review Committee came up with language and wrote a CCR, a regulation, to make it an option for the companies. but that was in conflict with the statute, so we have to change the statute in order to give companies an option to be able to make that change.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. President, that we accept this language presented by staff today, and a comment on it's way overdue.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
So moved.
Mike seconds. Any further discussion? I would tend to agree with you that this is way overdue for the industry.
Yeah.
Any further public comments on this topic? So hearing none, take a roll call vote.
Okay, Darren Van Steenwyk?
Yes.
Curtis Good?
Yes.
Rhonda Brand? Yes. Rusty Gall?
Yes.
And Mike Smith?
Yes.
Okay. The last one in your board package is 8623. 8623 is the provision that identifies if we're declining the application from someone and we're declining them based on their quarry, their either FBI or DOJ background results, then we're required to provide them with their quarry. So what we've done is we're changing our statute to be more in line with the actual penal code. So this language is now going to be exactly the same as it is in the penal code that addresses this issue, as far as when we have to send it to them and how, et cetera, et cetera.
Excellent. Any comments or questions for Susan?
I make the motion we accept.
Can I get a second?
So moved.
So Curtis makes a motion, Mike seconds. Any other comments or questions on this? Any further discussion? Any public comment on this motion? Excellent. So Susan?
Darren Van Steenwyk?
Yes.
Curtis Good?
Yes.
Rhonda Brand?
Yes.
Rusty Gall?
Yes.
And Mike Durant?
Yes.
Is there any other anything else on that specific agenda item?
No, but I'm assuming that the motion that they made is also authorizing me to find an author if we can get it in the legislative session this year.
Right, that's my understanding where all these three motions were to authorize the changes, adopt the changes and ask Ms. Saylor to go and find a legislative author to get these changes put in statute.
I just want to make sure that was clear in the minutes.
So now we have to go back to item number 3, public comment for items not on the agenda. We skipped over that and pushed that to the end. Does anybody have any public comment for items not on the agenda?
Are you going to read this one? Somebody.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you. So there was a submission, a public comment by Alex Dottoro, operator license 9685. He commented on 8505.11. He mentioned adding the language and the cubic square feet as measured by the Branch 3 company to that language. At this point, I believe that we're just going to potentially agendize it for the next meeting, so we can have further discussion on that. Yep. Okay.
So
Thank you.
On the agenda for the April meeting.
Yes, put on the agenda for the April meeting. So if there's no public comment, let's move forward to the next agenda item, which is board calendar. So Susan, you want to kind of walk us through that, please?
Okay, so for upcoming board meetings, what we already have on calendar is April 5th and 6th, and that will be in Sacramento because it's in conjunction with PCOC Ledge Days at the Capitol. Okay. Then we have July 11th and 12th. Making note that July 11th and 12th is then a Tuesday and Wednesday, not Wednesday, Thursday. Christina, in all of her efforts to try and find us a location in Southern California, has been obviously difficult. Even this meeting was supposed to be in Southern California, and we had to cancel and move it here at the last minute. So in her talking with hotels and vendors and stuff, it was recommended to her that if we move meetings to Tuesday, Wednesdays, we might have more success in getting the state rate for room nights for the board members and staff. So we're trying to move meetings now to Tuesday, Wednesdays. Again, we've identified Southern California. We're hoping to find something in Ontario, Burbank, someplace. We've pretty much given up on San Diego, right? Yeah, we've given up on San Diego. So, but we'll try and find something down south so that we can get the participation from the individual down south, of course, as well. October, we already have on schedule for, again, Tuesday, Wednesday. October is October 10th and 11th here in Sacramento at our location. Dave has put the January 2018 calendar in your board packages. He has identified when we'll hit that mark of 100 days. Preferably, we would be having the board meeting before we hit that mark of 100 days. And again, we'll try to look for Southern California in January after being here in October.
So what do the board members think? The 9th, 10th, 16th, 17th? You good with either one?
I'm good. Whatever.
Mike?
10th will work for me.
Okay, 9th, 10th. It's basically the same time frame as this current meeting. Narisha, Rana, do you have any problems with 9th, 10th?
I have to check with CAR.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, either the 9th, 10th, or 16th, 17th, how do we want to move forward with that?
Do you want to make a motion that it will be either on the 9th and the 10th or the 16th, 17th, dependent on,
No, we're talking January of January of
18.
18. January 2018.
Well, they're just talking about doing it either this week or this week, depending on Rana's schedule. So can we make a motion that it'll be one or the other? And then she can notify me. That's fine. Okay. So we can make a motion that it will be one or the other?
I'll make that motion that we do the 9th or the 10th or the 16th or the 17th, whichever is most convenient.
Okay. And we'll try and find a Southern California location?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Tran.
And one little recommendation, the 16th is my birthday, so.
So let's look at the 9th, 10th.
Yeah.
Okay, and try and make the 9th and the 10th work?
Yeah. Let's see if we can make the 9th, 10th work.
Okay.
We don't need a motion for that, right?
Yeah.
So then make a new motion, because Mr. Duran's motion was the 9th and 10th or 16th, 17th. So if you want the 9th, 10th, then can I have a motion to make it the 9th and the 10th?
I would make that motion that we have the 9th and 10th of January 2018 for work meeting in Southern California.
Okay.
Second?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Any further discussion from the board? Any public comments on said motion?
Darren, did you second that?
Curtis did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So roll call, Darren Van Steenwyk?
Yes.
Curtis Good?
Yes.
Ronna Brand? Naresh Duval? And Mike Lynn?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. It looks like we are going to move into, let me bring up my agenda, move into future agenda items. Any specific future agenda items that we would like added to the April board meeting?
We have the recommendation by Alex.
So we the recommendation for 8505.11 to address that. Anything else? How about anything from the public? Okay, so hearing none, it sounds like is there something? Yeah, there might be. Yeah, please come forward. And we would like you to introduce yourself and name and affiliation, but you are not required to do so.
I will introduce myself. I'm Nita Davidson. I'm with the Department of Pesticide Regulation, and I am chairing the Research Advisory Panel. So I probably we will have something to put on the agenda by then. Just a report of the progress that we've made.
Okay.
So there might be a request for proposals, or we might already be developing our rubric for how we're going to evaluate them. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Nita, just for clarification, the board members, before you got here, the board members did approve the criteria that was outlined and voted on by the research on that advisory panel. So I will start working with the department to prepare an RFP. I didn't plan to bring the RFP back before the board members because it will have the criteria already identified. So just so we're on the same page.
Right. So and really it's optional. If there isn't anything to report, then we can just say there. And Susan, you can mention that. So just to keep the panel apprised.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then other items for April, of course, we will have an agenda item for the extension of the fumigation enforcement program so that CACASA has a time to work with PCOC and weigh in. Obviously, we hope to have a bill in place and in print by then because the deadline is the end of February. And then the other item that I have, unless you have anything else, Dave, the other item I have is the one recommendation, one statute recommendation to look at again and bring back to the board members. Statute section 8560, I'm sorry. Dave, you have anything else, or is that all you have for April?
We have to bring back the Cipm recommendation, but that may be July.
That may be April, that may be July. But that's all I have unless you guys have something else or something from the audience.
Don't think so. Excellent. So we will be moving into closed session. So let's give ourselves, a 10-minute break, and then we'll move into...
Whatever, yeah.
So we'll start again at 11:15 in closed session. Thanks.